We continue now at the top of Daf 69b Mesechet Yevamos. This is Yevamos Daf 69b. The Mishnah is continuing to explain the case of onus and mefata, and so the Mishnah again said, let's say you have a situation of a Yisrael who rapes or he's mefata a kohenes, so then at that point again, it doesn't pass her, she can still eat truma. Ivra, if she becomes pregnant, so lo sachol betruma, so then she can't eat truma, as Rashi over here says. Ivra lo sachol kidyal fin and le'el. We learned this earlier. Uber posel, in Uber can passel. T'chsiv kinureh prat lemuberes. It says she returns kinureh beisavia. That's prat lemuberes. If she's pregnant, it's going to be a problem. So again, lo sachol betruma. In the case of Ivra, she cannot eat truma. Now nechtach uber b'meyeha. Let's say she miscarries. Rashi over here says nechtach uber b'meyeha tochel miyad v'uadin nami imilad tovamei. Same would be true. Let's say the child was born and then died. In other words, if there's no child any longer, that's what it means. Nechtach uber b'meyeha tochel. So then she's allowed to eat from the truma. And now the Mishnah continues to explain in the reverse case. Haya kohen shabal bas Yisrael. Let's say it was a kohen and he came upon a bas Yisrael. He raped her. It was a case of mefata. So again, that doesn't allow her to eat truma. Lo sochal betruma. In that case, she's not allowed to eat truma. Ibra lo sochal. Even if she's pregnant, she's not allowed to eat truma. However, yolda tochal. However, if she gives birth to a child, that child, who is now really the child coming from the relationship she had with the kohen, that child allows her to eat truma. And the Mishnah comments, Nimsa kocho shel ben gadol mishalav. It comes out that the strength of the son, in this case, is greater than that of the father, because the son allows her to eat truma, but the fact that the kohen was with her does not allow her to eat truma. Rashi over here says, Ibra lo sochal. Again, if the kohen, when he rapes her or seduces her, if he caused her to be pregnant, that's not enough for her to eat truma. Sha'uber eno machil es imo Yisraelis ad sheyotza la'aver olam. The halach is the fetus does not allow the mother to eat truma until the fetus is actually born, until it's a child. K'dechsiv, like the pasuk itself says, v'yelid beso. It has to be yelid. Yochlu yelud machil. We learn out that if it's a yelud, that can cause her to eat. She'in yelud ein machil. If it's not a yelud, it does not cause her to eat. Gadol mishalav, again, the strength of the son is greater than the father. Sha'boil lo yachol la'achila. If he just had relations with her, it's not enough. Memnei shelo bo'alel l'shem kiddushin, because it wasn't bia for the purpose of kiddushin. V'lav kinyono, who it's not considered his acquisition. Uveno, but his child ma'achila, that allows her, that causes her to eat truma, and therefore again the strength of the son is greater than the strength of the father. Ha'eved posel mishum bia. Mishnah continues, let's say you have an eved that passels because of bia. Ve'eno posel mishum zera, but it does not passel in terms of children. Rashi over here explains. Eved posel mishum bia. In bal kohenes, let's say the eved has relations with a kohenes, posel minat truma, that passels her from truma. Kidamrin b'gemara le'el, that's what we said in the Gemara earlier. Ve'en posel mishum zera. However, there's no posel mishum zera means as follows. Im yesh la zera lebas kohen mi Yisrael kosher. Let's say the case is as follows: a bas kohen, she has a child from a Yisrael kosher, shu eved v'meis, and then that child is an eved and he dies. V'meis bali Yisrael, meaning her husband, the Yisrael, dies. V'nishar zeh, and this one remains. Lo amrinan harei zera yesh la mi Yisrael v'lo sashav l'truma savia. We don't say, well, she has a child from a Yisrael and therefore she should not return to the truma of the house of her father. The eved vaday lav zerahu, because the eved is not considered zera. So somehow or another, we'll see in a moment, but somehow or another she has a child from a Yisrael who's an eved. Umefarish vazal hechem ashkachas lo sheyeh ben Yisrael kosher eved. The Mishnah is about to explain how it's possible that you can have the son of a Yisrael kosher be an eved. But the point is, ein posel mishum zera, the child that she has who is an eved, if the child is an eved, so that doesn't posel her from truma. That's not considered a child. That normally we say that if she had a child with a Yisrael, so then that's going to posel her from truma. That's not true over here. So again, eved posel mishum bia, ve'eno posel mishum zera. If an eved has bia with her, it posels her. But if the eved her zera, it does not posel her. And the Mishnah explains. Ketzad, how so? Bas Yisrael lekohen. Let's say the Bas Yisrael marries a Kohen. Bas Kohen li-Yisrael. Or you have a situation of a Bas Kohen that marries a Yisrael. Either situation, the Mishnah will explain both directions. V'yolda heimenu ben. And now they have this relationship and they have a child, they have a son. V'holach ben v'nichbash ala shifcha. And the son goes along and he has relations with a shifcha. V'yolda heimenu ben. And now they have a son. So now the son of a shifcha is actually considered an eved. Harei ze eved. That child is an eved. So now you have a situation where this mother, either the Bas Yisrael who married a Kohen or the Bas Kohen who married a Yisrael, she has a grandson that's an eved. And so the Mishnah now continues. Haisa emaviv bas Yisrael Kohen. Going back to the earlier two possibilities, let's say we're talking about the case where the grandmother of this Eved was actually the bas Yisrael that married a Kohen. And so now the Kohen died. She can't have Truma on account of her marriage with the Kohen because he died. The question is, can she eat Truma on account of the child, the grandson? This is the only living descendant she has in this case, that grandson who's an Eved. And so the halach is lo tochal b'truma. She cannot eat Truma. That's the idea, that the Eved is not going, if the Eved is the Zera, that does not allow her to eat Truma. And the same would happen in the reverse situation. Bas Kohen li Yisrael. Let's say it's a situation of a Bas Kohen who married Yisrael. Now, if the Yisrael dies, she should be going back to her father. If she is childless, she should go back to her father's house and have Truma. The question is, does this Eved grandson of hers mess that up? Because now she's not childless. And the Mishnah says, no, tochal b'truma, she could eat Truma, because again, the Eved doesn't count as Zera. That's what it meant when it said, ve'eno posel mishum Zera. The Eved doesn't count as Zera in this regard. And the Mishnah continues along similar lines, mamzer posel umachil. Let's say you have a situation of a mamzer that can passel her from Truma, but it also can allow her to eat Truma. And the Mishnah explains, Ketzad how so? Again, you have two possibilities. Bas Yisrael a Kohen, it could be a case where a Bas Yisrael marries a Kohen. Ubas Kohen li Yisrael, or it could be a case where a Bas Kohen marries a Yisrael. V'yolda heimenu Bas. Now they together, they have a daughter. V'holcha habas. Now the Bas goes along, v'nisis le'eved, ol ovid kochavim, and she gets married either to an Eved, or she gets married to an ovid kochavim, to a non-Jew. V'yolda heimenu ben, and they have a son. So hareza mamzer, that child is considered a mamzer. Now not all shitas consider that child a mamzer, but the Tan of this Mishnah considers the child of such a relationship where a Jewish girl marries an Eved, an ovid kochavim, they consider this child to be a mamzer. So now you have a case where this woman has a grandson who's a mamzer. And so now the Mishnah goes through both possibilities. Haisa aim imo bas Yisrael Kohen. If his grandmother, if the mamzer's grandmother, the mother of his mother, was the case of the bas Yisrael to the Kohen, so tochal b'truma, she actually is allowed to eat Truma. In other words, even though her husband, the Kohen, is no longer alive, even though the only descendant she has over here is this mamzer child, the mamzer is ma'achil. That's what the Mishnah meant when it said the mamzer is ma'achil. The mamzer allows her to eat Truma. And in the reverse case, as follows, Bas Kohen li Yisrael, if the grandmother was the Bas Kohen who married a Yisrael, now her husband died, she wants to return to the house of her father and have Truma, but if she has children, that's a problem. So that's what it means, lo sochal b'truma, she's not allowed to eat Truma. That's what it means, the mamzer puzzles her from eating Truma. And the Mishnah continues, Kohen Gadol, when it comes to a Kohen Gadol, pa'amim shehu posel, there are some times that he will pasel. Rashi over here says, Kohen Gadol, pa'amim shehu posel as Bas Kohen min ha-Truma. Sometimes a Kohen Gadol can pasel the daughter of a Kohen from Truma, mishum zara mi Yisrael, because it's considered that she had a child from a Yisrael. In other words, she could have a child, even if that child is a Kohen Gadol. You would think that child's a Kohen Gadol, that can't mess her up from Truma. No, if she has a child from a Yisrael and that child turns out to be a Kohen Gadol, that can sometimes passel her from Truma, and the Mishnah explains. Ketzad how so? Bas Kohen li Yisrael. Let's say you have a case. Bas Kohen marries a Yisrael. V'yolda heimenu Bas, and they have a daughter. V'holcha habas, v'nisis l'Kohen. Now the daughter goes along and she marries a Kohen. V'yolda heimenu ben, and then that they give birth, there's a child, they have a son. So hareza roy lios Kohen Gadol. That son is fit to be a Kohen Gadol. He's a Kohen. Omedu meshamesh al gabe hamizbeach. He can stand, he can serve on the mizbeach. Ma'achil es imo, and the case can actually be that because he exists, because this Kohen Gadol exists, so he allows his mother to have Truma. That wouldn't be a problem. This daughter goes along, she marries a Kohen, now she has a child with this Kohen, and that child is a Roy Leos Kohen Gadol, that child's a Kohen Gadol. The mother can have Truma. However, uposel emimo, but that child can actually passel his grandmother from Truma, meaning in the sense that the grandmother was a Bas Kohen, and now she married a Yisrael. She wants to go back to Beis Avia. She wants to have Truma, but now it turns out she has a descendant from a Yisrael, so it actually passels the grandmother. And the Mishnah concludes, Zos Omeres, this one will say, meaning the grandmother will say, Lo kivni Kohen Gadol, I don't want to have a son or a grandson in this case who's a Kohen Gadol. Shu posladi minat Truma, that he actually makes me puzzle from Truma. Having this grandson over here actually makes it that I cannot return to the house of my father, and I'm not allowed to eat Truma. And the Gemara says, Tanina loha detanu Rabbanan, our Mishnah teaches the same thing that is taught in the following brisa. Shota v'katan shenasu nashim, if you have a shota, an imbecile, or a katan, a minor that marry women, v'mesu, and then they die, neshosei and peturos min hachalitzu min hayibam. So those wives, their wives, are prata from chalitza and yibam, meaning to say, the marriage was not a marriage at all, even in the first place. Rashi over here says, neshosei and peturos alma ein kinyan l'shota. You see, there is no kinyan for a shota. You see that the marriage of a shota is not even considered a marriage. It's not an acquisition at all. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Ketzad hauso hare Yisrael shabal bas kohen tochal b'truma. This is the Mishnah said, if a Yisrael has relations with a bas kohen, so still the bas kohen can continue to eat truma. It's a situation of onus or mafata is not going to be enough to passel her from truma. Ibra lo tochal. But if she becomes pregnant, so at that point in time, she's not allowed to eat truma. And so the Gemara says, Kevan de ivra lo tochal. If it's true that when she is pregnant she can't eat truma, so leicha shem ibra. Why aren't we concerned that she might be pregnant? As Rashi over here says, Kevan de pshita lon de ibra amrinon lo lo sochal. If it's obvious that if she's pregnant she can't have truma, amai kotani masnisin Yisrael habal bas kohen bonus upitoy tochal. Why does it say that if a Yisrael rapes or is mafata bas kohen she can eat truma? Leicha shem ibra. Why aren't we concerned that maybe she's actually pregnant? That's the question of the Gemara. And the Gemara continues, Milo Tanan, didn't we learn in the Mishnah, Mafrishan Osan Gimel Chadashim, that we separate for 3 months? In other words, we are concerned, Shema Mubaros, that maybe they're pregnant. Rashi over here says, Milo Tanan, Meperak Dalet Achin, Gabi Noshim Shehuchlefu B'Shas Knisasan L'Chuppah. You have a case where the women got mixed up at the time of Chuppah. So Mafrishan Osan Mibalei and Gimel Chadashim, you actually have to separate them from their husbands for 3 months, because Shema Mubaros, because Mubaros, maybe they were switched, but maybe they became pregnant. V'havlodas Mamzerin, and now maybe they have children that are mamzerin. We need to make a distinction and know whether the child's a mamzer or not, and so therefore we need to wait 3 months so that we know who the pregnancy came from. And you see from this Mishnah that even with one act of bia, one act of relations, it's enough that we're concerned that they might be pregnant. That's the idea over here, Shema Mubaros. So over here also in our Mishnah, why isn't there such a concern? And so the Gemara answers, Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna. Rabba bar Rav Huna says, Liyuchsin chashishu. When it comes to yuchsin, when it comes to deciding the lineage, like in this particular situation over here, we have to figure out the lineage of the child. So there is a concern they might be pregnant. But litruma lo chashishu. But when it comes to truma, there is no such concern over here. The only issue is whether or not she can eat truma. If she's pregnant, she can't have truma. But we're not going to be so strict to say that maybe she's pregnant and therefore she can't eat truma. But the Gemara continues, but is it really true that by truma there is no concern? But we learned in a brisa otherwise. The brisa says, let's say a person gives a get to his wife and he says, this is your get 1 moment before I die. Now he could die at any moment, so the get might be good at any moment. So the halacha is asura lechol b'truma miyad. It's forbidden for her to eat truma immediately, right away, because again she might be divorced already. She might no longer be married to the kohen. Rashi over here says hareza gitech kohen lebas Yisrael. The case is it's a bas Yisrael married to a kohen. She is eating truma on his account, on account of that marriage. Asura lechol b'truma miyad dechol shaita amrina. Because every moment we say hashtamayis, maybe right now he's going to die. Alma asri lami suffik. You see here you have a suffix situation, and even by a suffix situation we say that we have to be strict and we don't allow her to eat truma. So if that's the case over here, that it's asur lechol b'truma miyad, again the question is in our Mishnah, why is she allowed to eat truma? We should be concerned that maybe she's pregnant. And so the Gemara answers, Elo Omar Rabba bar Rav Huna. Rather, Rabba bar Rav Huna says, B'nisuin chashashu. When it comes to a situation of marriage, so there we actually have a concern. By the case of the Mishnah we quoted earlier, where we separate them 3 months, they might be pregnant. They got switched at the chuppah, but it was a situation of marriage. It was an accidental switch of the chuppah, but they didn't consider what they were doing to be znus. But biznus lo chashashu. But when it comes to a situation of znus, like in our Mishnah, onus and mefata, so there's no concern that they're going to become pregnant. Rashi over here says, Alamar Rabba lo teima l'truma lo chashu. Don't say that by truma we're not concerned. We are worried about even situations of suffix. Elatar's lepir chadil el hachi answer as follows: B'nisuin, by marriage, kigon sheneschalvu b'chnisasan l'chuppah. They got switched, but it was during their entering into chuppah. Chashu l'shem nisabru. We're afraid maybe they became pregnant. Dehalo hafchu, because the woman is not going to turn over. The Gemara said earlier that the woman tries to prevent herself from getting pregnant by turning herself over. She's not going to do it in a situation where it's a regular case of nisuin. Avo biznus lo chashu. When it comes to znus, though, we're not concerned she's pregnant. Kedekaimelon, like we've established, isha mezana misapeches. If an isha's mezana, she's going to turn herself over after the bia, kedei lo tisaber, so she won't get pregnant. Hilkach like a suffix. Therefore, there's not going to be a suffix. That's why in this case, in our case of the Mishnah, where it's onus and mefata, we're not concerned that she's going to be pregnant, because she's going to turn herself over. She'll make sure that she does not get pregnant. But the Gemara continues, Uvinisuin michashashu. But is it really true that even by Nisuin, do we really say by Nisuin there's a concern that she's pregnant? V'atanya, but we learned in a brisa, Bas Kohen shenisas liYisrael. Let's say you have a case of a Bas Kohen married to a Yisrael, v'meis, and the Yisrael dies, so tovelas v'ochelas b'truma la'erev. So she can immerse herself and she can eat truma that evening. So again, it's the same situation over here. Maybe she was actually pregnant. We should be concerned she's pregnant, and therefore she shouldn't be able to have truma immediately. It seems like we're not concerned of pregnancy even by Nisuin. And so to that, the Gemara says, Amar Rav Chisda says, Tovelas v'ocheles ad arboim. What she does is, she immerses and she eats until 40 days, because for the first 40 days, even if she's pregnant, we don't really say that the pregnancy counts as a pregnancy until the fetus is actually 40 days old. The ilo miabra, halo miabra. If she's not pregnant, she's not pregnant. Of course she could eat truma. V'im miabra, and even if she is pregnant, ad arboim maya ba'almi. We say that until the 40th day, it's just considered mere water. It's not really considered a pregnancy. So she does have that window, that opportunity to eat the truma. But the Gemara says, Amar le Abaye. So Abaye said to him, to Rav Chisda, if that's your answer, Yachi, if so, Ema Seifa. Look at the end over there, where it says at the end of that brisa, what does it say? It says, Hukar ubra b'meya. Once it's recognizable that she's pregnant, Tehei mikul kalas l'mafreya. So then retroactively, everything she ate is going to be a problem. Now that's not really true. It's not retroactively a problem, because of the first 40 days, even if she was pregnant, it's fine. And so to that, the Gemara answers simply, my mukul keles ad arboim. It just means it's mukul keles. Everything she ate was a problem until the 40th day. But before the 40th day, meaning from day 0 until day 40, that actually wouldn't be a problem, even if it turned out that she was pregnant. And the Gemara continues, Itmar, it was learned the following, Machlokas Amoraim, Habo al Arusasu bebeis chomav. Let's say a person has relations with the woman who is his Arusa, the woman who he betrothed, in the house of his father-in-law. Really, before the Nisuin, before the marriage, the girl stays at the house of her father. So if he had relations with her in the house of his father-in-law, Rav Amar Havlad Mamzer, Rav says in that case, that act of relations makes that the baby is a mamzer. Shmuel Amar Havlad Shtuki. But Shmuel says, no, the baby is considered a shtuki. A shtuki is a child that we cannot identify with certainty who the father of that child is. And the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Mistabra milse de Rav. It makes sense what Rav is saying, the daima me'alma, where there already are suspicions that she's having relations with other people. In other words, in such a situation, she's only an arusa. She's not having relations, or she's not supposed to be having relations with her husband yet. And we have a woman over here who in general we suspect is with other people. So then we assume that this child is a mamzer. She's an arusa, she's a betrothed woman, and she had relations with someone else, and we assume the child is a mamzer. But let's say there are no suspicions that she's been with other people, so Basra Didei Shadinan will assume that really this child was with the person that betrothed her, with her husband, and therefore we will not make the child a mamzer. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, where can I prove to you that this is true? In other words, where can I prove to you that Rav only says the child is a mamzer when there are already suspicions that she was with other people? I can prove it to you, Dekatani, because we learned in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, Yolda Tochal. It says in our Mishnah, let's say again you have a case of Onus and Mefata. They had relations, but there was no marriage. And the case was, again, it was a Bas Yisrael to a Kohen. And so the halach is, if she gives birth to a child, that child allows her to eat truma. And so Rava says, hey chidami, what exactly is the case over here? If the case is that there are suspicions that she's had relations with other people, so yolda my tochel, if she gives birth to a child, why does that entitle her to eat truma? Why should we assume that this is the child of this Kohen? Elalav minei daima velo daima mialma. Rather, is it not? The case is there's a suspicion that she's had relations with him, but there's no real suspicions that she's had relations with anybody else. And so Rava says as follows: If in that case over there, meaning in our Mishnah, all the individuals concerned, it's usher. She can't have any relations with this Kohen, who was either the onus or the mafata, and she can't have relations with anybody. It's usher with all these people. And yet, what do we say? Basra didei shadinan lei. We say that we assume the child is from him, and that allows her to eat truma. So over here in a situation where she's betrothed to this man, that to everyone else it's also for to have relations. To this person it's actually mutter. This is the person that she's engaged to. This is the person that she's betrothed to. So lo kol shekain. So certainly we should assume that the relations was with this man, and therefore the only time that Rav would say the child is a mamzer is if there were already suspicions that she was with other men. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Abaya, Abaya says back to him, meaning Abaya says back to Rav, Liola Meimelach, really I'll say to you, Kol Heicha de Daima Mine, anytime we have suspicions, we've heard rumors that she was with him, Af al Gav de Lo Daima Me'alma, even though there is no suspicions, there's no rumors that she was with other people, Amar Rav Havlad Mamzer, still Rav says that the child is considered a Mamzer. My time, what's the reason? Diamina, because we say as follows, Mida Afkar and Nafsha Lagabe Yaris, from the fact that she made herself Hefker to the Yaris, from the fact that she's willing to be with the Yaris before marriage, Afkar and Nafsha Lialma, so she's also made herself Hefker to everybody. In other words, we're going to assume that this child is a Mamzer regardless. So then the question is, in our Mishnah, why do we assume that the child that she has is from the Kohen? And the Gemara explains, Umasnis in our Mishnah, Shahayu Shneim Chavushim Bebeis Asurin. The case happens to be they were both bound up in a prison. In other words, it was a situation where there was no one else available. It is clear that she had relations with this Kohen, and only in that case we would say the child is obviously from the Kohen, and that entitles her to eat Truma. And the Gemara continues, Ika Diamri, some have the version as follows. If there's a relation, if they have relations, everybody agrees, there is no argument, that we assume that the child is from him. There's no question about it in that case. And the case is as follows, the Machlokas Amoraim is as follows. Arusa she'ibra. Let's say you have a situation of an arusa that she becomes pregnant. Rav Amar Havlad Mamzer, Ushmuel Amar Havlad Shtuki. Rav says in this case the child is a Mamzer, and Shmuel says that the child is a Shtuki, meaning again, we don't know, we can't say for certain who the father was. And Rashi over here explains in the second version, meaning if he admits that he had relations with her. In other words, if the Aura says, I had relations with her, and they had a child, so then everybody assumes that the child is from him. We do not assume that the child is a mamzer. The question is just if she becomes pregnant. So then again, there's a machlokes. Rav says, Havlad mamzer vaday de basar ruba di alma shadinale. We assume the majority of the world is probably the father. Omena shachrina have, it must have come from a different man. And again, Shmuel says the child is a shtuki. We can't say for certain where this child comes from. And so the Gemara continues, Amar Rava, again, in this version, Rava says, Mistabra milse de Rav. What Rav is saying makes sense. De lo daima mine, that there is no rumors that she was with him. V'daima me'alam, but there are rumors that she was with other people, and therefore we assume the child is a mamzer, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Amud Aleph.